I'll move.
Second.
Not a lot going on, except one new thing I mentioned, beavers arrived.
Yep, beavers.
Have you seen them in your neighborhood?
No, but I'm going to be looking for the rise of the water, because there is a history down in our area of a huge one that was many years ago.
Yes.
And the city actually, it was Thanksgiving Day when I looked out, my lilac bushes were being trimmed. And then it went up and down the creek.
Where'd they build it?
Down, probably the Park District property north about a good, golly, I would think halfway up Alton, so those houses back there, it was down in that area.
Right.
How
And,
long did they stay?
Well, the called, I guess I did it. ABC Wildlife came, and then they put a canoe right there in my driveway, and they went down, and they did a couple of weeks' worth of pulling it out of there, of course, but also taking the beavers out of there. And then I guess they had to stop. The city got reports from some people that lived down there, either the cul-de-sac area, that they didn't want anybody on that creek, on that property doing it. And so the city then just said that was the end of it. And the fellows who did it said they did not get them all, and I learned more about beavers than I ever thought I wanted to know. They actually lived together in 3 generations.
Yes.
And the guy said that they got a lot of them from our area and a little north, because they also had done some,
What year was this?
I can't tell you
Or-
right now, it's been quite a while ago. We're probably talking 15 years ago. And anyway, he said he got most of them, except they were still up north. So I kind of wasn't surprised when they were building up north, and it could be a new batch, of course, too, of beaver. And then, this is like about 4 years ago, in the middle of winter, a beaver came up from the creek, and he tried to eat some trees, and he wasn't successful. It was in the snow. And the only way I knew it was he came across the back patio, and I happened to be lying on the couch, and the door was open. And so I had to go out with the broom, and he went all the way around, tried the pear tree, tried the maple, tried all of them, didn't have much success, and then went back down into the creek, but it was big.
Well, they're
And
getting-
that's been 4 or 5 years ago.
Okay.
But I'll keep watching, and if there seems to be a rise in the water, then we know for sure.
Why would the rise be south of the dam?
No, south of the bridge.
Okay, but were they south of the bridge or north of the bridge?
No, south of the bridge.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it was south of the bridge.
And what-
Halfway between the bridge and the Park District, and it was big. The way it was discovered first, not just by me, the way it was discovered was when, I always forget their title, the federal people came to read the meter and the flow, and he could not get a flow reading because the water was too high. And so with his hip boots, he walked down, and that's where he saw it. And I had already then called the police before, but that's when they came. He came to read the meter, and he said the water flow was high.
Well, Mark Roscoe sent me a picture, or like last week, said that they had removed a dam.
Yes, I
It's-
saw that
You
as
saw
well.
that. It's just north of Palatine Road, like spitting distance from the frontage road. And by Friday, when I got out there to take a look, it was back. So
Uh-oh,
it doesn't take them long to rebuild.
no.
They've cut down quite a bit. Most of it is that sandbar willow that grows along the creek anyway, which is fine. They can trim that down a little, but they have gone after a few neighbors' crab apples. They cut one, like 20 foot, this big around, and left it standing on a point.
Yeah,
By the next day, I don't know, they took it down or it fell by itself, but it was down the next day.
Yeah,
you know.
they trimmed the creek bank pretty well.
Yeah,
They
they
could
do.
come right now and do it if they wished, but.
But Mark did say they don't, you know, they don't do anything about them. Frankly, you know, where they're situated right now, it's floodplain there, so if they pond it a little bit, it's really not terrible nuisance or anything. And if you remove the ones that have moved in, you'll probably just get a new family.
Well, they moved them way up north. They took them out of our area, and they were going to get them all at that time, except those people complained. I think it might have been, but I don't know for sure, that the city might have stopped it because the price was going up.
The price. Oh, well, yeah, they need a permit from IDNR to remove them. And like I said, it's a good chance another, like the coyotes, you, the habitat's right, you'll just get another family moving in, because they're all up and down Des Plaines River. It's not that,
Right.
Well, what's
Hard for
kind of,
them
what's
to
kind of
move.
interesting is that they've migrated from the Des Plaines that far up the creek, which is,
although I did see one hit by a car probably 15 years ago on Hints Road, by that, between 83 and Wheeling, where's that big, not pond, I don't know, retention area, water is, which I was surprised.
The ABT people at that point actually said they thought they were coming from the north,
Coming
Not-
down
coming down.
from where?
Well, it goes all the way into Wisconsin.
The Des Plaines, yes.
The Des
Oh,
Plaines
yeah,
does, and then the
right.
tributaries,
Yeah,
they-
probably, yeah, probably. So I did call our
So they're
alderman.
still around.
Alderman to see if he wanted to meet with the Park District and just, you know, go over, maybe just generally talk about what could be done in that section. And he was polite and referred me to Joe Wade, who says he has a good relationship with the Park District. Go talk to Joe Wade. So I don't think he has much interest in really doing anything. The Park District several years ago had a plan for doing something with that park. I would like to talk to him to see how, I mean, if these guys really establish themselves, it could change the nature of that park and retention basin a little, not necessarily, you know, for the worst. Yeah, I mean, it could, if they stuck around, it could turn what's now, you know, shallow creek into an actual wetland.
Right. Well, I mean, I have a little bit of experience dealing with beavers.
I bet.
We do, I mean, there is trapping, so right now is the season, I believe, that you can get a beaver trap, and certainly there is a process that if the city so chose, that if it's impeding drainage and it becomes a nuisance situation, that you can trap beavers all year round if necessary. But this is the open season, and the arrangement that we had was, there was people that would trap the beavers at relatively low cost, and in return they got the meat and the pelts from the beaver, and they did whatever they did with them. And so I think that's certainly something that could be suggested. That does require a willing property owner to basically do that.
The property owner here is the Park District.
So then as long as the Park District has, as long as they don't have a policy against it, and they're willing to cooperate and basically authorize it, because you're talking about putting a trap on your property to trap it and ultimately catch it and remove it. I mean, the beavers shouldn't be, they have to have enough water to come upstream. So I would think that if you remove a beaver at this time of the year, you shouldn't have the issue again, at least until next year when the waters rise again and they can swim back up. Because there's sections of the creek now that, there's not enough flow.
Right,
The beaver
right.
would be able to, really traverse the entire creek from Des Plaines. So I think that's certainly something that we could suggest.
Do we want to remove them?
Well, it's a real flooding issue.
Well, it's
Because
a
the
flood-
water rose big time.
Yes, but it's where they're situated, the water is rising on a floodplain. There's plenty of room for a ponding thing.
Well, maybe where you're talking, but
Yeah.
down with us, no.
Well, that's
because
the
it's
thing,
part
if you
of the-
move, try to relocate them or something, sometimes they'll set up shop in a worse spot than they're at
well,
right now.
the problem that we have there, that at that juncture is just upstream from there, a block away, is the outlet from Lake Arlington.
It's like 3 blocks away,
Okay,
so,
but you still have
but the water is
all of that
still,
water from Lake Arlington and from across the street that has to go through from
Right.
Arlington Heights, those ponds over there.
where they're
Yeah.
set up is exactly where it floods because of the Lake
Right.
Arlington water. So, I mean, that's that's the area where the banks are the lowest, and it spreads across, and it's floodplain. Does stay wet for a long time, but there's nothing there except grass, and so, I don't know.
I think we should look, personally, I think we should look into having it removed.
I think at least needs to be considered as an option, and perhaps you do take the approach that, you know, it's not harming anything at this particular time, but then it's something that's gonna constantly need to be monitored, and, you know, probably before, you know, the spring rains, or whenever the high flows are from when Lake Arlington's discharging, as well as everything up north of that particular section of the tributary, you know, then you're talking about removing it, you know,
Well,
kind
because,
of unplanned,
you know,
if I can say it
when
that way.
you're looking at that area, and if I put a dam in there, what kind of permanent water are we gonna create behind it?
Right.
Oh, the wetland
Okay.
pond.
And so, then you need engineering to look at, okay, we're essentially creating another detention pond. What effect that has on all of the flow as we start marching down and around the creeks.
Backwards. Well, going south, you know, what research I did, beaver dams reduce the velocity and volume of water going south, so they may help you.
Well, I guess I'm kind of disturbed a little bit that we're not doing, if they're still here, and after 2 weeks, they've built another one, and they stick around for 3 generations, and we don't make any effort to attempt to remove them. Is that part of the creek issue? Should they be coming onto our properties and taking down the trees? To what, you know, how do we answer these questions? I don't think that we can have beaver, you know, up and down our creek forever, because they don't belong here.
Well, there's a
That's a
balancing act.
matter
I mean, I think at the end of the day, there's a balancing act that, you know, we do live with some wildlife, and there's wildlife.
Well,
that can
John, I
create-
get that. I'm
Right.
not that naive. I get it.
Right.
What I'm proceeding to say, though, if the dams themselves are as big as the one that they removed down by my place, that is really going to impede the flow. The water won't even get into the displays. It was so high.
The one they're building is just small. It's just
Yeah.
enough to
Mark said
back the
18
water up
inches, he said.
so that it's deep enough and for them to hide a den. I mean, to
Right.
have a.
Well, I guess maybe the attitude is we just wait and we just kind of cross our fingers that the water, you know, if we get a big flooding issue with a lot of rain and there's a big dam somewhere, that could really hurt us as a city.
Yeah, I personally don't know enough about beavers and dams and how high they build.
Well,
And
Oh, I
what
saw
kind-
some in Alaska.
Well, the one they built is barely, it almost just looks like, you know, a typical blockage. It's a foot,
Oh, okay.
okay? It's
The
not
one I-
that big,
yeah.
it's not a lodge,
Sure.
okay? If they're denning, it's in you know, they're digging a burrow in the bank, and they need the water to be high enough to cover the entrance. And that's why they built the dam largely. So
Yeah,
anyway,
the one down south that was in our area was big. It was
I did
very-
I did do a little research and thought I would maybe send it, you know, pass out a letter to the homeowners affected up and down.
That's a
wanna
good idea.
Read that and see what you think. I would just, you know, deliver, there's like a dozen right in my neighborhood. And just not offering to do anything, just sort of telling them what's, you know, little, what to expect, and,
Metal hardware cloth, you mean, what is that, chicken wire?
not chicken wire, because they chew right through it.
Really?
But I did try, I went to the store just to see if, maybe some we could, one 5-foot section of 4-foot high hardware cloth, $17, plus $10 for 2 steaks, and it didn't even wrap one. I tried to wrap the one crab apple that they took about half of it off already to try and protect one tree that was on a homeowner's property, just the little trial and error to see, because they had already wrapped they must have had them before or something else, because they had all their trees wrapped, but more with like that plastic mesh, and they just climbed over it. It wasn't high enough. So I don't know if they had, I tried talking to them, nobody was home, but I'm not sure if they wrapped them for rabbits, deer, or beaver.
I know we had to wrap them, the pear trees and the ones at the back. And
To
we used that wire. It wasn't really chicken wire, it was a little stronger. But we had to put it up about 3 feet at least.
Yeah, they had it wrapped about, and
Just
from what I
right around
read,
the trunk, right?
Yeah,
the
around the
the
trunk.
beavers can be 3 to 3.5 feet high. You need 4 foot, because if there's a snowbank, they'll, so, but a 25-foot roll of 4-foot hardware cloth is almost $60, so it's not cheap to wrap a lot of trees.
Interesting.
Yep.
I mean, I think as far as dealing with the current situation, if there is, I think it's something that would just need to be monitored. And, I do agree that you could probably hold some water at 6 inches, 8 inches, or 18 inches, to the height of the den or dam that it is now. But at some point, it could potentially get to a 2-foot, 3-foot blockage that is going to have to be removed. And if it continues to reoccur, because sometimes they can dam it up within a 24-hour time frame, then that's the time when, you need a solution to remove, relocate, whatever the desired outcome is. And it is something that it can be, I'm not gonna say controversial necessarily, is not the right word, but, for every person that wants to remove the beaver, there's gonna be somebody else that wants to protect the beaver. And so, it is a balancing act that I think the public organization, whether it's the park district or the city, is better suited to handle than to try to rely on private property owners to secure their own IDNR permit to remove the beavers or whatever. And so I do think if it becomes a nuisance condition for the creek, then it's something that is best suited if a public agency pursues that.
I'd be inclined to just, let homeowners know to protect their trees and wait and see how it plays out. See,
Well, I do think that it would be a concern if they go around a house and take down a lot of trees that have been planted there for years. I think that does become an issue for the city. You can't hear me? Maybe that's a good thing. Is that good? Okay. And I think you're right, we do need to monitor.
well, I'll, wander down periodically as the winter goes, see what.
Well, I think it's good, the homeowners, it's a good
I
idea.
just thought we'd alert them, maybe they'll sit out, get out their binoculars at sunset and see what, give us some idea how many there are. Don't know.
Yeah, there's no harm in sharing good information with the residents.
I think it's a good thing.
Okay, we'll just try and print some up and put a picture on there.
Yeah.
I need a picture.
Sure.
Well, the reason that they're always
Yeah.
chewing trees is because their teeth never stop growing.
Right, I've heard that. Now, if we could just get them to chew the buckthorn instead, that's the problem.
They like-
They could do that, they could, do a whole lot of nice,
Yeah.
lumber stuff for us and clean things up a little.
They like the soft, sweet ones, like a lilac bush.
Willow trees.
The willows are great, I mean, they're kind of thick down there, so
Mhm.
having
And
to thin
maples,
those
they
out a
like
little
maples.
Isn't bad, but they also just roamed a little bit more than I'd like to see. What's anybody else got? 'Cause
I did send an email to Mr. Roscoe requesting a meeting, and so I think in the next couple of weeks, we've tried to meet with him. He wanted an idea of what we wanted to talk about in advance, so we could prepare for that. So there's a general direction that you want to provide for that, but then otherwise, we had talked about Rick and Hart and I trying to set up a time when we could meet with Mr. Roscoe and try to understand kind of bigger picture drainage issues that are on their radar for next year, and that'll be, you know, they'll be budgeting for things like that, is what we had talked about the
Right.
last time.
Yes, right.
Certainly this beaver conversation, you know, we can share kind of the general discussion that we had here, and you know, if nothing else, at least share with them, you know, kind of what some of his options potentially might be or could be, so, but if there's other.
Yeah, well, that goes right along with mailing out this basically educational information
Yeah,
on what's going on, and I think once we meet with the Public Works, see what we can do to help his cause and things that we can do to complement what Public Works needs to do.
yeah, if, you know, if we talk to, if they have a strategy for, do they want to continually remove this dam if they keep rebuilding it, and how do they actually take it away, or do they want some homeowners to just
Pull it out.
pull it out periodically?
Right now, it's on the park property.
It's on park property. I don't know how often, especially if snow starts coming, how often they're able to get to that, whether they want. I mean, if homeowners don't want them there, maybe they'll take responsibility for you know, checking in every couple days,
Yeah,
pulling it down again.
Yeah, I don't know how the lots go there. I'm just wondering if the
It's behind the
church.
church, it's behind the church.
Yeah, I know. Does the church go to the other side of the creek?
No, church doesn't go down to the creek. The Park District owns property on both sides of the creek.
Ah,
But
okay.
I'm not sure how far the homeowner property lines go. Some of them may have planted into the Park District property.
Okay.
It's a little hard to tell. How about the the paving going on in your neighborhood? What happened? Did they finish it? Did they do any drainage projects along with it?
No, not to my knowledge.
Is it finished?
I didn't know they
No.
did any.
Oh,
Repaved
the repaving that they were
Where?
doing on Alton?
on Alton and Edward. On
All
Earth.
the way?
I believe so, yes. So they did repave Alton and Edward. They did not do any drainage improvements as a part of it. I did send one of the topics that I brought up with Mark in my email to him, asking for the meeting, was an issue that I saw with what they did on the road work, which is the asphalt grindings for the shoulder. You know, they used asphalt grindings for the shoulder. On Edward, you know, there's steep banks where the storm drains are at the bottom of the ditch, basically, and it's 2 or 3 feet down, and so all the asphalt grindings are piled up against the storm drains, and I just basically said that, you know, he's gonna be continuously jetting out the culvert if they don't, you know, fix it or do something differently to stabilize the slope. And so he did recognize that as an issue, and ultimately said they were trying to determine what the solution was, and that was right before we had the snowfall this past weekend. So this would have been, I think, last week or the week before, and so I don't know what their solution or plan is, but I'm sure he'll have an update for us when we meet them.
Okay.
But otherwise, they did not do any cross culverts or any other additional drainage improvements.
So that's not part of their paving projects?
Right.
No.
I mean, I don't know if that particular area warrants it, to be honest with you. Certainly, I think some of the storm drains need to be rebuilt on Edward. I don't know if Alton is entirely the same way.
There is a big backup. Rick knows more about it than I do.
Back up where?
Across from your place.
Well, he filled in his ditch, so.
I wonder, nah, never mind.
A homeowner just
Yeah.
filled it in?
You bet.
Did he pipe?
Brought a ton of dirt in there.
Did he put a drainage pipe under,
No,
in there?
he just filled it up. And yes, there's always a drainage problem, but the whole,
So did-
all along Alton there's no ditches, so there's water can't go anyplace.
Did he get him permission from the city to do that?
But I have no idea. I'm not officer of the city, so I do not really.
Since it's not his property.
He's had a lot of interaction, I think, with the city too, because the drainage is not proper there coming from Camp McDonald Road. And it builds up and the sediment along there is, the water stays and doesn't have anywhere to drain. And so it gets to be pretty bad and sometimes good for mosquitoes and deep. So he just filled in his
Well, that's
portion.
certainly something we can bring up as well then.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the city ordinances that allow you to fill in your
Like, he didn't
ditch.
fill it in. It was, right now, I'd say probably like half his culvert is filled, going underneath his drive. All the water just sits there and kills all the grass. And so they put down some wood chips first, and then came in with dirt, and then planted seed and put down straw.
He did or the city did?
He did.
My neighborhood, it seems like if anybody complains, they'll, loud and long enough, they'll come in and pipe the whole thing. Put, the big 12-inch pipe in, tie it into the drain sewer, and put grass, sod over it.
They do know there's a big drainage issue in our area. Larry says he's also brought it to the attention. We got the impression that it was kind of on the docket for them to be doing something in the planning stage down in that whole area. When they had the big flood down there, and I called him, and he did say that it's in the planning stage to do something about that drainage and flooding down in that area.
Yeah, but Arlington Countryside's tops on the project list, according to the last meeting, or whatever. Did you ever get the report on that meeting? All right. What would you like to pursue next year?
Well, I think that when we meet with Mr. Roscoe in the Public Works, to see if we can get a priority of what they see for the city, and then for us to look at that priority and see what we can do, or maybe we'll have an opinion on it one way or the other, that no, we think, B should be before A, or, to give some input and just kind of see the overall strategy, in that, the note was made about the not having the home rule passed and having funds specifically set aside, for drainage and creek problems. So we really need to have an overall understanding of what our priorities are, which areas are the worst, and then kind of see if we can work not only as a committee, but as a city, and start to convince them they need to portion funds to do certain things.
Well, we did have a priority list from that meeting, kind of. Arlington Countryside, Patricia Lane by the creek there, east of Burning Bush, south of Apple, that area up there, Dorset between Dale and Schoenbeck, Lake Claire area, Elm south of Willow, Alton and Edward near the creek, and Wheeling Road at Tully Creek were among the.
But
and
no
most of these
mention of any
priorities-
funding commitment.
No, none of
That's,
these,
I
most
think,
of
what
these
we're saying.
priorities have been on this, they've been since 20 years ago.
Well, it's got to be part of the city budget, I think, is the intent of what I think they need to do, or it's not going to get any better.
And I think we need an understanding of when we're talking about these critical areas, what are we really talking about? Is it you know, how much work needs to be done. You know, I might have, okay, this area needs it, but that's a $10 million project. Here's another critical area, no, that can be done with $500,000. Those are the kind of, the things that we really don't have kind of laid out or,
The city, the Steve Galt Hamilton Associates did a report, and I think that's what they did. They, you know, determined the cost of the various projects that they were recommending, and that's when they recommended as the top priority, the Arlington countryside area.
okay.
Well, then I think then to Hart's point, I think just a discussion about how do we get there. I mean, it's one thing to have a list of needs or a list of wish lists on projects on a wish list, but ultimately, whether we have home rule or not, you know, the city kind of has to continue to move forward, and whether it's identifying some type of reallocation of funding, or you know, even if it's as simple as emphasizing that drainage projects should be included as part of the paving projects, and then how do you fund that? You know, because obviously everybody wants to stretch the dollar and do as many roads, but you also, there's a recognition that drainage is much cheaper when it's done prior to the road being built, as opposed to coming in and having to deal with it 2
Yeah.
years or 5 years later because the culvert's undersized or it's collapsing or whatever the particular situation might be. So I think having some understanding of his prioritization process, and then ultimately working with him for some type of suggested avenues to ultimately help fund it. And we also have talked about grants, and so certainly, you know, I think some of the creek-specific projects probably have more grant funding available than road projects. You know, road projects are less environmentally friendly or less funding available for those types of things since they're maintenance projects. You know, but that's where, you know, I think we can get a lot out of that meeting to try to be able to better understand that and get a game plan for 2018.
And part of this situation is I personally don't know how well our aldermen in the different areas are up to speed on this drainage environment that we're talking about. You know, it's one thing that for us as a commission in dealing with public works, but those that make the final vote for or against what's going to happen with the expenditures of the city's funds, where are they in this scenario? They need to be involved, or we need to at some point, let's say when we identify an area, then sit down with that alderman and either educate them or see where they're coming from.
You want to try talking to Scott Williamson? He didn't seem too interested in doing more than returning the obligatory phone call.
Well,
Pat Ludvigson was at our house, so he was very aware. And since that call came in for Patricia Lane, he now has become very aware.
Is that his area?
Well,
That's-
it's
no, that's-
Ward
that's-
4.
That's Rosenthal's, isn't it?
No, Rosenthal's 2 on my side,
Oh,
across the street.
oh, okay, he goes, Ludwigson goes all the way to Easton. I thought he was more toward the west.
He was there.
Okay,
And
well,
so and that was the area that got huge flooding. That Patricia Lane, it was very bad. And
what, Labor Day?
no, this was when the 100-year flood happened. And nothing has changed there other than there's more growth along the creek, all along those properties. But, so he's kind of familiar with the creek as it goes through there, and then it runs up.
Did we ever determine if the homeowners own that or if the industrial properties own it?
No, the industrial is across the Wheeling side.
The creek runs between it, between the
Right, I think
homeowners
the-
and the,
The homeowners are on Prospect Heights.
yes, but who owns the creek? The homeowner who backs up to the creek or the business that backs up to
I
the
think
Well, I
it runs
don't-
down the middle of the creek.
Well,
in that
according to the
particular
neighbor, he
section.
thinks
Okay.
it only goes to the top of his land.
Again,
And
People
until
don't
there
wanna
are,
claim the creek, and so.
no,
Right.
until there are surveys produced or requested or whatever, there's no real way at which we really know.
no, unless somebody pulls out their survey and shows you.
Right.
If they had a survey taken, a lot of people, even when they sell the house and buy the house, they don't have
It's not a
surveys.
requirement.
Yeah.
It's a requirement.
Is it required?
Nowadays, it is.
Nowadays it is?
If you got your mortgage 25 years ago, it's a different.
No
story.
mortgage.
Well,
No, I had mine all done 3 times, so I don't
Or if you're
think.
paying cash for your house.
I think when,
you know.
when you look at the FEMA maps, okay, and you expand them, you can see, like, when I look at it, I can show you on the map, there's the property lines for all the lots, and you can see the creek is entirely on my property. So you'll see that as the creek goes down, looking at the individual lots, you can tell whose side is it on, does it, normally they would go to the middle of the creek, but that's not the
You're
way
right,
the
yeah.
subdivisions were divided here.
Yeah, they, kind of,
Is that visible on every piece of property, Hart? Maybe we should be looking at some of those if we
where
don't
do you
know.
find these FEMA I mean,
You go right on the,
online? And you
Website.
can get it big enough to see the individual properties? Okay.
It kind of gets granular as you blow it up.
Right.
But you can see structures, and if you know the structures, you can kind of start to place.
It shows the property boundaries? On a
Yes.
FEMA map,
Yep,
lot lines?
yep.
That's good to know.
And that's how it determines whether or not your property or your structure is ultimately in the floodplain, whether or not it's required to have the required flood insurance.
Right.
Is all based on that map.
Okay. Haven't seen those. I will take a look.
And I think the other thing that we can certainly push more for in 2019 is some of those community-wide creek cleanups. That's something we've talked about now for a
Yes.
while, and it would be nice to try to get at least some commitment to that, whether, his preference, the spring or the fall, or both, or whatever it might be, and whether it's just a portion of the village or the city or the entire city, we can
yeah,
start hammering on
that's
some of
where
that
I
as
think
well.
when we meet with Mark first and basically run through this entire scenario, and then look at, like we're talking about, creek cleanup and so on, and target certain areas as far as priorities, and then at that point is when we grab our aldermen and get them on one-on-one, say, hey, here's your area, here's what's going on,
Right.
and bring them up to speed.
Yep.
Those cleanup days, I
Yes.
think, are ideally done early spring, because you really see all the junk.
I would think that's where we should start first, because we never did anything for the creek, which we were going to do. And that was one of our goals last year, to have a cleanup day. But now everybody's worried about water drainage here and there, and that's not what we're supposed to be about. And we haven't done anything for the creek to help anybody along the creek.
Okay.
My grandkids cleaned litter up in the creek on one section.
So are we talking garbage, or are we talking vegetation?
That's a good question.
I think before we had talked vegetation.
Right.
The garbage is, I guess, the expectation or the understanding that if it's your property, you should keep it clean, at your, and, that can be disposed of in your normal garbage stream. And then the landscape waste was what I think we were gonna ask the city to basically help remove.
Right, have days where we could drag debris to the street.
Right.
I
Okay.
think that if the homeowners now have the brochure, they know the expectations along the creek. And if we design a time and an area to help them so that we can help them, and then maybe we can put their stuff out on the creek, and maybe we can get them, Public Works, to come and, pick it up and just do one area at a time.
Yeah, and when we do decide, let's say on an area, I think that's when a mailing should go out
Absolutely.
to just those specific people that, hey, the city's gonna come, here's what we need you to do, and
Right.
so on and so forth. And I think it'll be a little more effective that way. Because when we used to do it, communication with the homeowners in that area was kind of weak. In other words, we didn't have the mailing or the ability to
No,
send everybody.
no, our reps did it, because
Right.
each of us were in a zone, so our reps would do it, but,
And that's what we don't have now, is someone representing every area along the entire creek. So,
it was very effective in that we got a lot of support from the neighbors. And they recognized that there's people that are concerned, and so they came out to help because they knew when the date was and so on.
yeah, and well,
It's good PR, I guess.
Our goal as a commission is to educate and to get people enthused to start to participate with the city in taking care of this issue.
Well, I would suggest April as a time to do that, because all the winter garbage is out there, and vegetation is leafless for the most part, and easy.
Yeah, and
The only thing is the
and-
weather, it's muddy, and
I don't know when yard waste pickup starts in the spring.
well, if we're having public works pickup, doesn't matter.
Well, but again, that falls along with like the homeowners and what we've recommended as far as educating people that, hey, if you cut it up 4 feet, bundle it where it's not extremely heavy, it'll go out with the regular garbage. So it's not an issue that, you can do it over time, a little bit every week, do a
Right.
bundle or two.
Well, I think that we'll have to ask him about that garbage contract and where,
Oh, yeah,
since
that was just
Right.
up for discussion
yesterday, I think there was a meeting. and
Monday.
I didn't. But certainly, if there's a movement away from yard waste pickup, I don't know that that's what, if there is or not, but if there is some discussion over change of service, then certainly that's something that will impact what what a homeowner does with their stuff when they remove it, and ultimately how much stuff the Public Works would be asked to be removing.
Okay, with that, I have nothing else, and
Rick had a suggestion that we don't need to meet monthly. Every other month.
Right, I think, we don't have a budget. We have limited resources and limited things what we plan on doing, so not that I'm not saying that we're not important, but there's nothing pressing that we need to meet every month, I think.
I would agree.
We got the question asked about December.
Yeah, they already canceled December because it's whatever, I don't know.
Before Christmas.
Yeah, it's the day before Christmas, Christmas
Right.
Eve or something, or Christmas Day perhaps.
well, let's put that on the agenda for discussion. Let's meet in January, and maybe hopefully by
Before
that time,
January,
we'll
we'll
have-
have met with Mr.
we'll have
Roscoe,
met-
and we'll have more
Right.
specifics, and if we're gonna do cleanups, then we might find the need to continue to meet
Sure.
frequently, or and if we don't, we don't. But certainly, this is a slower time of the year for the creek, and hopefully the water levels stay down, during this time typically, and then, it's really just preparing for next spring.
Okay, so preparing for next spring, we are going to aim for cleanup, planning some kind of cleanup days in, say, April. Round about Earth Day.
right.
Sure.
Just weather, a little bit weather dependent. It's a good time, but it tends to be a muddy time
Yeah.
and a rainy time.
He does the injections in the back.
Meantime, I'll pass some beaver letters out to the local homeowners, see what kind of feedback they, see what their reaction is a little bit. If I have the opportunity to actually talk to anyone, nobody answers the door.
Are we thinking we will send the beaver
I'll just-
information to everybody on
No,
mailing?
No, I was just gonna go to the homeowners on either side of where they're at right now.
Oh, I see.
I was just gonna handle
Okay.
it, there's about a dozen, maybe.
Right.
That's good
And
to have
hopefully,
a copy,
hopefully
though,
you have a
in
chance to
case,
talk to them and see, have
case
you
they-
noticed? Have
sure,
you-
sure.
They're out there.
if they travel downstream, I'll just keep looking at the water rising.
Well,
No,
if they're
this-
happy where they're at, they won't.
Oh, it was a good dam. They had a good house.
No, you did a good job on the article. though. This-
That's very
this is
good.
I learned a few things,
Yeah, I did just by reading it.
so. I'm gonna, yeah, hopefully I'll get somebody to be, with their binoculars out there and see if we can get an idea, how big of a group it is, or whether it's just one lone male looking to set up. So, all right, move to adjourn.
Yeah.
So moved.
So moved.
It's like, whatever you're supposed to
All in
say.
favor?
All in favor,
Aye.
aye.
Aye.